Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
A profound sense of loss, but also reflection and gratitude on a lifetime of service, not just the community, but of humanity.
The spiritual leader for millions of Ismaili Muslims around the world has died. We look back at the life of the Aga Khan and his connection with Canada. Plus,
after 4 years, you would just hope that there would be more.
The husband of a Port Moody woman who vanished and was later found dead 4 years ago has now been charged, but her family is not satisfied. And
so we kind of took the brunt of the hit.
Crunch on the water. Boat owners wonder how and why a BC ferry collided with several moored vessels on Bowen Island.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. It is a somber day for an estimated 15 million Ismaili Muslims around the world, including 20,000 here in BC. Their spiritual leader, Prince Karim Aga Khan, has died at the age of 88. The Aga Khan was a unique figure around the world, deeply devoted to improving the lives of people in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, along with being a jet-setting billionaire. As Havard Gould reports, the Aga Khan had special connections with Canada.
Say good morning, His Highness.
Good morning, His Highness. Prince Karim Aga Khan being greeted by school children in Kenya. The school, just one of many he helped create. He opened hospitals too in Afghanistan and elsewhere, bringing medical services to people who had none. He believed strongly in creating opportunities so people could take control of their lives. This factory in Côte d'Ivoire made it easier for many farmers in Africa to package and market their crops. And when Pakistan was hit by a powerful earthquake in 2005, the Aga Khan flew into a devastated community to help rebuild.
And I hope that all together we can bring in new technologies of construction so that inshallah your homes, your civil society buildings will be safer in the decades ahead.
He was just 20 years old when he became the 49th hereditary Imam of the Shia Ismaili Muslims after the death of his grandfather, with responsibilities for a population scattered across 25 countries. He was himself a man of many countries, a British citizen. He was born in Geneva, educated at Harvard in the U.S., and competed in the Olympics for Iran. In France, he inherited and expanded the family business of breeding racehorses, while maintaining lavish properties in several countries. He said tithes, the regular donations from community members, were always kept separate from his personal wealth. And his primary mission, he said, was to help others in a myriad of ways. For example, his passion to create parks for people in dense urban centers, like this one in India. Over time, the Aga Khan became one of the most connected figures on the planet, his high-level contacts helping clear the way and raise funds for billions of dollars in projects.
I do pay attention to detail because I think ultimately one should address an issue once and try and get it right, and not have to come back because you've been slipshod or because you haven't taken into account something which you could have foreseen. There's so much that has to be done. It's better, I think, to try and do it once properly.
His link to Canada was cemented in 1972. That's when dictator Idi Amin abruptly expelled Ismailis from Uganda. The Aga Khan asked Canada, through his friend then Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau, to help. Canada took in thousands of refugees, a gesture the Aga Khan never forgot. Decades later, the Trudeau family friendship led to an expensive scandal for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau when he vacationed on the Aga Khan's private island in the Caribbean.
Building and sustaining a pluralist society is always going to be a work in progress. It doesn't have a finite end.
The Aga Khan often seemed disappointed by the way the West viewed both him and Islam. But he didn't let that hold him back as he championed education and understanding, and the tolerance that he said was essential to the very survival of the world. Havard Gould, CBC News, Toronto.
Ismaili Muslims here in BC are gathering to remember Prince Karim Aga Khan and mourn his passing. The CBC's Liam Britton joins us from Burnaby outside of Jamaat Khana. It is a gathering and worship space for Ismailis. Liam, a somber time there and at other gatherings. What are people sharing with you? Apologies, we've had some technical difficulties with Liam Britton in Burnaby. We will try and get back to him as soon as we can. More than 4 years after a Port Moody woman vanished and was later found dead, police say her husband has now been charged. But as John Hernandez explains, the victim's family says they are not satisfied with the investigation.
There's still a long road ahead as the community heals from her tragic death.
Just over 4 years after Trina Hunt went missing from her Port Moody home, the first charge has been laid in relation to her death.
The BC Prosecution Service approved one count of indignity to human remains against 52-year-old Ian Hunt.
Ian Hunt was Trina Hunt's husband. He's charged with interfering with her body. Police say the alleged offense took place on January 16, 2021, 2 days before he reported her missing. Trina Hunt's body was found in Hope 2 months later. Hunt's death was originally considered a homicide, but now police won't say whether her death is suspicious.
Typically at this juncture, all of the viable investigative leads are exhausted, which is why the team was in a position to provide a report to Crown Counsel.
Hunt's death ignited a community campaign for justice, including search groups and a $50,000 reward for tips that would lead to an arrest.
She was just such a joy. She was so positive.
Stephanie Ibbett, a family member, says Hunt's loved ones are not satisfied with the investigation. They hoped police would identify a suspect who would then be charged with murder.
It's hard not to feel disappointed when it's been 4 years of waiting for some sort of justice, and this is what has come of it.
IHIT says its focus is now on supporting the court proceedings.
If we get a tip in our information line tomorrow, we would not be closed off to that.
Indignity to human remains can carry a 5-year prison sentence. Ian Hunt is not in custody, but is expected to appear in court on March 5th. John Hernandez, CBC News, Surrey.
Let's go back to our top story. People across the world mourning the death of Prince Karim Aga Khan, the spiritual leader of Ismaili Muslims. They are gathering here in BC to remember the Aga Khan and mourn his death. The CBC's Liam Britton joins us from Burnaby at a Jamaat Khana. It is a gathering and worship space for Ismailis. Liam, as we said, a somber time there and at other gatherings. What are people sharing with you?
Well, Dan, somber is the right word here at the Ismaili Jamaat Khana in Burnaby. People, I'm told, are feeling a range of emotions. Some people were kind of aware that the Aga Khan had been in poor health in recent years and are really at peace with his passing. But for others, some real sorrow, heartbreak at what has transpired. And so people are arriving early for prayers here today to reflect on the Aga Khan as both the spiritual leader of their faith, but also for his incredible philanthropic contributions over his lifetime, obviously, as we've heard in the health and education worlds especially. And that's what we heard about his legacy from a prominent Ismaili here in BC, along with the Prime Minister.
For many in the community, since his imamate began in 1957, this is the only imam the community has ever known. And so obviously a profound sense of loss, but also reflection and gratitude on a lifetime of service, not just the community, but of humanity.
And I lost a very good friend, a friend of my father's and a friend of mine.
And so, Dan, the province estimates there are about 20,000 Ismaili Muslims here in BC, and they got a chance to see the Aga Khan, many of them, in 2018 when he came to Vancouver for part of his Diamond Jubilee ceremonies or celebrations in that year. He also received honorary degrees from UBC and SFU, where he was feted for his global citizenship. And as we heard, the Prime Minister also reflecting on the Aga Khan's legacy, calling him a friend who will be reflected upon for years, Dan.
The CBC Liam Britton outside an Ismaili Jamaat Khana in Burnaby. Liam, thanks very much. One of Vancouver's long-standing warm weather traditions has been permanently enshrined in law. After several successful pilot years, Vancouver's Park Board has voted to make its Alcohol on Beaches summer program official. We spoke with our municipal affairs reporter Chad Pawson about it all earlier. Chad, while this motion passed, the board was clear they're not necessarily encouraging people to crack one open at the beach.
Yeah, not at all, Dan. Of course, most people in Vancouver realize having a drink on a beach is a common occurrence despite rules allowing for it or not. Now, Park Board commissioners hope that a now permanent program allowing it in 7 places will better manage litter and problematic behavior related to alcohol use on beaches. Here's Park Board Commissioner Tom Digby. Now, he was initially skeptical about the pilot projects, but voted last night in favor of making alcohol on beaches permanent.
People have been asking me, are we encouraging drinking on the beaches here? And I tell them, absolutely not. What we're trying to do here is accommodate existing drinking that's on the beaches, which can be problematic, and we're trying to systematize it.
Now, by that he means having appropriate garbage and recycling where the drinking's happening, properly communicating the rules and when it's allowed and when, and having the all-appropriate staff, such as Park Board rangers and police, to keep an eye on behavior. Now, pilot years allowed the Park Board to study all of this, Dan, and a staff report says violent incidents are down at 7 beaches where alcohol is allowed. So, for the record, the beaches are Jericho Beach, John Henry Beach, Kitsilano Beach, Locarno Beach, New Brighton Beach, Spanish Banks, and Second Beach.
Chad, what are the costs of making alcohol on beaches in Vancouver officially permanent?
Yeah, good question. It's not insignificant, Dan. For 2025, it will be close to $1 million, with police costs at $450,000. Now, the city is funding most of this, but the Park Board's worried about future years. They don't want to be stuck with the bill for what they say is helping make Vancouver fun again.
All right. Chad Pawson, thanks very much. On Vancouver Island, cleanup crews were once again busy trying to clear paths for drivers and commuters after more snow fell across the south coast. As Claire Palmer explains, anyone not comfortable driving in the stuff is being urged to stay home.
With 30 centimeters of heavy, wet snow, a massive cleanup effort is underway in Nanaimo to get traffic flowing, with 25 city plows out working to clear major roadways.
Our staff have been out since 5:30 yesterday morning dealing with the storm. We saw accumulation stop around 5:30 or 6 o'clock this morning, and that's allowed us to move into the residential areas.
Police are warning drivers to steer clear of several roads around the city following the first significant snowfall of the winter, mainly those with hills, and that there were 6 vehicle incidents yesterday, but with no major injuries.
That's relatively low. A lot of times it's based on the speed of the vehicle, the tires are not adequate for the snow conditions, and driver inattentiveness. So you really have to bear caution, especially today with the kids not in school.
O'Brien adds that you have to clear your car completely of snow before hitting the roads, no matter how long it takes.
Yeah, so legally you have to prepare your car before you start going. You have to take that 5 or 10 minutes if that's what it requires. You have to make sure your windows are clear, the snow is off the roof, your license plate is clear, and your lights are clear. We see this time and time and again, and that's a causative factor for collisions.
Tow trucks have also been busy since yesterday, helping people get out of fender benders, pulling cars out of ditches, and moving abandoned vehicles off the roads to make way for plows.
The majority of our calls have been recoveries out of ditches, out of driveways, which doesn't make sense. They should just stay home. Yeah, we've been extremely busy. Probably about 75% of our calls are recoveries, just to get people pulled back onto the road and hopefully to tire shops. Yeah, we've got a full complement of staff. That being said, with the icy conditions, even our trucks are having problems with chains on.
With temperatures staying low, the snow will stick around until the end of the week, with no new accumulation expected. Claire Palmer, CBC News, Nanaimo.
Stephanie Hungerford is here with a peek at the weather, and that says it all, doesn't it, Stephanie?
It really does. Really cold across the entire province. We've got some extreme cold weather warnings in many of the regions across BC. And for tonight and early tomorrow for Metro Vancouver, expect really, really cold weather tonight, -5, wind chill up to -10. We might see some snow as well, Dan.
Okay. Thanks very much, Stephanie. BC vineyards are going high-tech to save grapevines from extreme cold. That story's next. After 2 harsh winters, BC's wine crop has been left in ruins. But as Brady Strachan shows us, vineyards are testing new methods to protect grapevines from that extreme cold.
The delicate buds on this grapevine are Bobby Arcego's most valuable asset.
Yeah, I just want to protect, this is the rootstock of the plant.
As vineyard manager at Black Hills Estate Winery, he's trying to protect these young vines from the winter chill. 1 year ago, extreme cold wiped out 95% of BC's wine grape crop.
We saw temperatures dip down to minus 27, even some minus 29 in areas around here, and that caused us to see extensive damage and death with our vines.
Arcego is using straw, composted mulch, and a technique called hilling, piling soil over the vine base to insulate his vines. These age-old practices are used at vineyards in colder climates. A newer method, these geotextile fabrics trap heat from the ground.
If we can't protect against the cold weather, we're going to be questioning if it's a region that we can grow wine grapes in.
An hour away, researcher Ben Min Chung is testing grape varieties for cold hardiness. He's helping growers test cold protection methods by measuring temperature differences between insulated and exposed vines. Even a few degrees can make or break a crop.
They can probably tolerate not lower than minus 25. When we see minus 25, that's pretty much, that's sure that's 100% lost.
Doesn't look like it's putting out a lot of heat.
At this Kelowna vineyard, Rowan Stewart is testing a high-tech solution. Strings of vacuum-sealed LED lights give off infrared heat to the adjacent vines. At a cost of $10,000 to $20,000 per acre, it's costly. But Stewart says even saving one crop makes it worthwhile.
You know, that's the nice thing about frost protection. You have it function one time and you've paid it off.
If successful, he'll expand this trial next winter.
I'm pretty confident we'll find a solution and we'll be back making amazing Pinot Noir and Chardonnay in a couple of years.
Brady Strachan, CBC News, Kelowna.
An investigation has now been launched after a BC Ferries vessel collided with moored boats at a private dock on Bowen Island. The Queen of Capilano caused heavy damage to that local dock and missed several sailings after the weekend run-in. As Belpuri shows us, the owner of one of the damaged boats fears it may never sail again.
So we kind of took the brunt of the hit.
The crash was captured by surveillance cameras. Now the sailboat usually moored here is in need of extensive repairs.
The back of the ferry boat kind of almost came through the cabin. So all the cabin windows are blown out, the door is completely bent, and the railings are totally smashed in.
The Queen of Capilano was pulling out from Snug Cove on Sunday when it sideswiped 3 boats tied up at a neighboring marina. Passengers on the ferry saw it happen.
No damage to the solid metal ferry, but the wooden boat was damaged. And also there was a small inflatable tender that I thought would have popped, but it didn't.
It's not yet clear what caused the collision.
I could see that the gusts were quite unpredictable and quite violent. So it was certainly weather had a factor in my opinion.
After the crash, the ferry kept going.
It was a hit and run, basically, so they left and went back to Horseshoe Bay.
It took another 3 hours before the ship was pulled out of service until the evening. BC Ferry says it would have been a challenge to stop the ferry immediately after the incident. Limited space and strong winds were complicating factors. No one was hurt in the incident.
Yeah, had this been the summer, it would have been it could have been much worse. There could have been more damage. There could have been people on the dock. There could have been kids on the dock and the boats.
The Kowloon is a 1973 Grand Banks classic. Brittany Yu's family bought it last September. They've sailed hardly 4 times.
We're hoping the integrity of the hull is okay, because that's almost priceless job.
Old wooden boats are hard and expensive to fix. BC Ferries is taking responsibility, but sailing this boat next summer may be out of the question. Belpuri, CBC News, Bowen Island.
There was chilly Tofino earlier in the day, sand and snow on beautiful Long Beach, temperatures hovering around 2 degrees. Stephanie Hungerford will be back with your BC wide weather forecast after this. Canadians may be breathing a temporary sigh of relief with the pause on U.S. tariffs, but Donald Trump's threat of a painful trade war is far from over. As Olivia Stefanovich reports, Team Canada will spend the next 30 days to try to avoid the levies for good.
Less than 24 hours after Canada made new border commitments with the U.S., officials are already reinforcing one of the busiest ports of entry.
Our objective today continues to be to prevent tariffs from being applied to both of our economies. And our objective tomorrow will be the same.
Nearly 10,000 frontline personnel are being deployed at crossings like these, with efforts coordinated by a new fentanyl czar and a new $200 million intelligence directive to crack down on the illegal drug and organized crime.
We are convinced good efforts will prevail, good faith and goodwill. There's a lot at stake here.
I was pleased to see that there were some significant improvements in the package that the Prime Minister put on the table.
Ottawa already announced a $1.3 billion plan to boost border security. Now it's going even further to address U.S. President Donald Trump's concerns, such as listing the cartels as terrorists.
We can't try to appease Donald Trump. We need to fight back and defend our country.
NDP leader Jagmeet Singh says the federal government needs to get tougher.
We need to target his allies like Elon Musk. I've said, let's shut off the flow of critical minerals.
But it's a delicate situation, with hundreds of thousands of jobs hanging in the balance.
The only ones that will be able to convince President Trump are Americans themselves. So we need to continue the pressure.
That includes avoiding American products.
We want to encourage people to buy from Canada.
And buckling in for the ride ahead.
The only thing that's certain is uncertainty for the next 30 days.
And that uncertainty is compelling the federal government to structure its spring budget to fight U.S. protectionism, a sign Trump's threats aren't expected to end anytime soon. Olivia Stefanovich, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now, Canada made a series of commitments in order to get the U.S. president to pause those levies. Among them, a new idea, creating a so-called fentanyl czar. But how quickly can the government put such a position in place? And what would the job accomplish? Catherine Cullen takes a closer look.
And we have to stop fentanyl.
Donald Trump has a lot of gripes about Canada, but he keeps coming back to fentanyl.
It's pouring in from China through Mexico and Canada, and they've got to stop it. And if they don't stop it, the tariffs are going to get worse, a lot worse.
So Monday, sources say Canadian officials pitched Trump for the first time on a fentanyl czar.
The integrity of our borders.
As they show off their tools to fight illicit drugs.
So now it's alarming right now.
Behind the scenes, they're trying to figure out what precisely the czar will do, beyond trying to reassure the president. The public safety minister says the job requires working with police, the justice system, and other countries.
Fentanyl czar role will be involved in helping to pull all of this together so we can get over any hurdles and execute on a plan that involves minimizing, if not eliminating, fentanyl from Canadian soil.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith had recently suggested a border czar, but the Premier, often at odds with the federal government, likes this idea too.
We have one Prime Minister who's not going to be there in 33 days, and then a new Prime Minister who might only be there for another 33 days, and then a new Prime Minister after that. We need to have a consistent voice through this period to demonstrate that we're making real progress on it.
A senior federal source says the czar could be someone in uniform or ex-police. With Trump giving Canada 1 month to, quote, alleviate the crisis, the new czar will have to hit the ground running.
We're looking here at a very short window of opportunity to demonstrate to our neighbors to the south and the president that we're taking this very seriously.
It's not clear exactly how Trump will measure success, though Canadians would certainly welcome an improvement in the overdose crisis that has enveloped much of the country for years.
It's actually troubling that the government is now reacting when, in fact, we've all seen what fentanyl has done to some segment of our society.
So many questions about the new so-called fentanyl czar remaining unanswered. For more on this and the ongoing and uncertainties around it, we're joined by Christian Leuprecht, political science professor at Queen's University in Ontario. Christian, thanks for being with us. We heard in Catherine Cullen's piece this idea of what's called a fentanyl czar would have to work with police, the courts, other countries. What kind of power or authority would they really need to have then?
Well, really what you need in this case is somebody who can coordinate. You'd be surprised to know that it's actually very difficult in bureaucracies to get anything done, let alone get them to work together towards a common goal, because each department has its own interest, each department is protecting its own resources. And so this is first and foremost making sure that all federal departments are working together, that there's a clear lead, a clear direction. When there's dispute over fiscal or human resources, there's somebody who can make an expeditious decision, but also somebody who can coordinate with the provinces. For instance, there's been much announcement, of course, by the Premier of Ontario, for instance, about Ontario Provincial Police resources being devoted to surge capacity at the border, but there's been hardly any coordination between the federal government and provincial government, or federal agencies and provincial agencies. These are all the matters that a fentanyl czar can solve. What the fentanyl czar can solve is the fact that there are simply not enough people. So it means that we're going to be pulling people off of other projects that will get short shrift as a result, and also that the people that we're pulling off are not border experts, and in many cases not investigative experts, so they're generalists, so we're going to get limited return for the investment that we're making.
We heard a suggestion that it could be on somebody ex-military, ex-police. We love to appoint judges to oversee things in this country. Any names spring to mind for you?
What you need somebody is somebody who understands the federal bureaucracy and has a reputation for being able to get things done and to cut through the policy, the fiscal and the HR challenges, which are quite significant, of course, in a government that has imposed both fiscal cuts in terms of operations and maintenance budget and a sweeping hiring freeze, and nonetheless is able, under these staffing conditions, to move the goalposts significantly enough that the Trump administration will notice, and all that in 30 days. This is a huge challenge.
Why do you think it has not been given to somebody like the public safety minister or another cabinet minister who can perhaps not have to get so up to speed on how the bureaucracy works, at least at the present time, and simply make these changes?
Well, what you need from the minister is political top cover and a clear direction that this is a political priority for the department. But ministers are simply too busy. They are not just ministers, of course. They sit in cabinet and have to make all sorts of cabinet decisions. They are also local members of parliament. So they have a lot of things on the go, and they're at best generalists on the files. Mr. McGuinty is a little bit more proficient, given that he was chair of the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. But nonetheless, this requires a senior civil servant who understands how you make the bureaucracy work, and ideally probably somebody from the intelligence or enforcement community, because you have to understand uniformed culture, and you also have to understand how the Americans operate. So probably somebody who has experience in the U.S. or working significantly with U.S. authorities.
A big job ahead for whoever is chosen. Christian Lupprecht, political science professor at Queen's University. We appreciate your time and your insights.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Now, the Trump administration has followed through with its tariff threats against China, imposing sweeping new duties on imports from that country. Journalist Yina Li is in Beijing with more on China's quick but limited retaliation.
A 15% tax on U.S. coal and 10% on goods such as farm equipment, pickup trucks and crude oil. These are just some of the U.S. imports that face new Chinese tariffs. China also announced export curbs on 5 critical minerals, these metals that are crucial to new technology and innovation. Beijing argues that this is just a response to Washington's actions as the U.S. slapped an additional 10% tax on all Chinese imports first. This reaction, though, is actually rather measured. So far, we haven't seen a huge escalation on either side. Donald Trump actually backed down from the 60% tariff he had promised on the campaign trail, going down to 10%. And Beijing now with this relatively muted response. It does appear both sides are actually publicly gearing up to enter a round of negotiations first. The future is still very much uncertain. The official reason behind Trump's tariffs is the fentanyl crisis, and the Chinese have in the past shown willingness to cooperate and collaborate with the US on this topic. But should the White House once again dig deeper into issues that have plagued their bilateral relationship in the past, such as trade imbalance or their tech rivalry, such as critical minerals versus chips, etc., well, then tensions can certainly heat up as we move forward. The tit-for-tat Chinese tariffs are set to start on February 10th, so there is still some time and some room for discussion. And according to the White House, a call between Presidents Donald Trump and Xi Jinping could take place in the days to come. This is a new chapter in the trade war between China and the US, but not as dramatic as observers had feared months ago. But still, for exporters, for importers, everything is up in the air right now. One thing is for sure, though, this isn't Beijing's first time dealing with Trump's tariffs, and they can perhaps find areas of negotiation moving forward.
Ina Lee reporting from Beijing. The uncertainty over what comes next with tariffs is also being felt by many Americans. Sarah Levitt went just south of the border and found shoppers and businesses bracing for impact there.
In Plattsburgh, New York, just a 30-minute drive from the Canadian border.
Everything's already expensive, so we don't need it any more expensive.
Shoppers admit they're worried about a trade war, even with this delay.
What's this tell you? Huh? I'm for the Canada. U.S. is no good no more.
Others, though, remain confident in their president.
I think Mr. Trump's doing a great job. I think it's about time we get the level the playing field.
Economists say if tariffs come, prices will go up in the U.S. as in Canada, the impact immediate. Among the biggest changes, Americans can expect to pay more for cars, fuel like gas, lumber, which will see construction prices rise, and groceries. The potential increases are concerning at this grocery store, but the manager says Donald Trump's unpredictability is just as frustrating.
We don't know what to tell our customers if they're like, can you guarantee that this will be here? I can't guarantee anything.
Hannah Stasko says she gets the sense some people don't realize just how intertwined the Canadian and U.S. markets are.
I'm a local produce supplier. We get a lot of stuff locally. Those local suppliers still need their equipment, they still need their supplies, they still need their partners in Canada that they've built relationships with.
We must sound the alarm.
For Michael Cashman, an elected official with the town of Plattsburgh, the uncertainty is stressful.
There will be a hardening on both sides, and how do we come to some type of solution for this? This could have a rippling effect that would rip the very fabric of our economies apart.
There's another worry here in Plattsburgh that this uncertainty could further strain relationships between Americans and their Canadian neighbors. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Plattsburgh, New York.
The European Union is also bracing for the possibility of U.S. tariffs. President Donald Trump has threatened to target the 27-nation bloc, and EU leaders are looking at how to respond. The CBC's Crystal Gumansing has more.
With the threat of U.S. tariffs against the European Union still on the table, leaders on this side of the Atlantic are busy planning. Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Union Commission, today made a point of highlighting the EU's long-standing relationship with the U.S., saying the transatlantic partnership has been a cornerstone of peace and prosperity for the better part of a century.
We will be ready for tough negotiations where needed and to find solutions where possible, to work out any grievances, and to set the foundations for a stronger partnership.
Von der Leyen has not been in communication with U.S. President Donald Trump since his inauguration and said contact with his administration has been limited. Trump hit the pause button on tariffs against Canada and Mexico Monday. It's unclear what his plans are, however, when it comes to the EU. His last comments came Sunday when he said tariffs against the EU could, quote, come pretty soon. EU trade ministers meeting in Warsaw expressed a hope that any disagreements with their largest trading partner could be worked out.
America first doesn't mean America alone, because America needs partner too. And I'm sure we will find positive and constructive solutions.
Now, how the EU would respond has not been made public. For now, it is very much a wait-and-see situation. Crystal Gumansing, CBC News, London.
Coming up, Canadian scientists are uncertain about the future of their research as the U.S. government appears to put a pause to a key funding source. That story after this. Darius is away tonight, so Stephanie Hungerford is here with our BC-wide weather forecast and all the warnings that you could muster.
I know, really. I put them all out there, right?
Yeah.
So many. It is very, very cold. This is what this means, especially the Arctic outflow warnings. This is where we're going to see a lot of high winds in the north coast region. We've got winds upwards of about 70 kilometers per hour. This is also going to be the case in the Whistler region, Squamish, the entrance to Howe Sound, about 50 kilometers per hour, and also down into Hope. So that's where we're going to see that Arctic outflow warning. Now, in terms of the extreme cold, this is going to be the case for basically the wind chill. So in the Peace region, we've got wind chill upwards of -40, -37 right in the center of BC, and then also in the Kootenays around -30. So very cold across the board. But as we can see, not a lot of snow. The precipitation has kind of eased up. We're going to have a little bit more snow in the Kootenays. We are going to see a little bit in the lower mainland, but only about a 30% chance of snow tonight and into tomorrow morning. And we're going to see really across the board quite a nice few days in British Columbia. Just cold, lots of sun, which is what we always hope for in BC because we see a lot of rain. This is going to go through into Thursday, and then you can see quite cold, but where we're going to see the temperatures drop, like I said before, is basically in the northern regions and the central areas where we'll see a lot of wind chill, very, very cold. And much of the same throughout the week. Friday, we'll see a little bit warmer in the lower mainland. We're going to see around 1, 2, 3 degrees. And then for the 5-day forecast for Metro Vancouver, really cold, -10 wind chill for Vancouver tonight. And then we're going to see sun and cloud. Pretty nice for the rest of the week, Dan.
Okay, but chilly. We've been warned. Thanks very much, Stephanie. Donald Trump may have hit pause in a trade war he began with Canada and Mexico, but the U.S. president has evoked strong emotions among many Canadians, something that looks less polite and a lot more patriotic. Thomas Daigle reports.
Consider it the Canadian way, venting frustration with humor at this New York pharmacy, replacing American snacks with Canadian favorites. For Toronto comedian Arsalan Shirazi, it's not all a joke.
I think there's an element of people saying like, hey, we're not going to just let you push us around because we have to stand up for ourselves. We have to push back.
Just ask any Canadian outside Toronto's U.S. consulate. You'll get an earful of patriotism mixed with anger.
I'm pissed. I think it's the wrong way to do it. It's our closest ally. It's ridiculous, actually.
This plaque thanking Canadians for their support after 9/11 is a reminder of how close the relationship between the two countries has been. But historians can name other low points like this. The Star-Spangled Banner booed in Montreal in 2003 as the U.S. pressured allies to join the invasion of Iraq. Canada memorably declined, exposing cracks in what had been a mostly stable relationship since Confederation.
That sparked a kind of emotional response that we're seeing similar to today, where a lot of Canadians are like, hey, stop bullying us, stop trying to kind of push your views on us.
He points to this Guess Who classic. Written as a protest song and released amid strong anti-American sentiment in Canada over the Vietnam War.
There's always been this undercurrent of kind of conflict and cooperation that's been going on. And Canadians have had to deal with the United States in a way that most other countries do not.
This time, the patriotism is erupting with calls to buy Canadian, and the maple leaf seen on social media a lot more than usual.
I think that comes alongside a bit of an anti-American sentiment, a frustration that our closest neighbor and trading partner has decided to treat us this way.
Oh, Canada, our home and native.
In a new twist Monday night, Nashville hockey fans booed "O Canada." So while the trade war may be on pause, tensions still simmer.
Thomas Daigle reporting. Scientists in Canada are also expressing concern over Donald Trump's apparent pause on federal health spending in the U.S. They say it could stall research on new drugs, including vaccines and cancer treatments in this country. Jennifer Yoon explains.
uncertainty about funding freezes from the U.S. National Institutes of Health, or NIH.
Do you have some results you can share with me?
Canadian medical researchers watching to see if their work will be put on hold.
There's a lot of anxiety. It's hard to understate how important this agency is for everyone around the world.
The NIH funds some of the world's top research. Last year, Canadian researchers received about $40 million of its $47 billion in grants.
Do you mind making it full screen?
This brain researcher, who has relied on NIH funding throughout his career, worries about future scientific research.
There are a number of diseases and injuries that are not well treated at the moment, and there are people that are committed to the improvement and care of these individuals, and absent this kind of funding, these people will just continue to suffer.
Vaccines, cancer research, cystic fibrosis, studies of the brain. These are all grants that are active in this fiscal year.
This Canadian epidemiologist, who does HIV prevention research in California, doesn't know when her new grant will be reviewed.
That was supposed to get advised upon next week, that we don't know if we're going to get it.
So you can do that protocol.
Scientists say good research cannot endure that kind of uncertainty for too long. It sends a chill throughout the scientific community.
We don't know a lot about the details, and they seem to be changing every second. And I think that uncertainty actually is adding to the crisis.
Others wonder if there's a silver lining by attracting talent to this country.
This is an opportunity for not brain drain, but brain gain.
As for Strathdy, unsure of the future of science in the U.S., she's considering moving to Canada. Jennifer Yoon, CBC News, Toronto.
Meanwhile, recent actions by the Trump administration to roll back some transgender rights has members of the community in the U.S. worried and looking north. As Katie Nicholson tells us, they may have an argument to claim asylum in Canada.
You want to go outside? Kelly and her family moved from Florida to Minnesota a year and a half ago. Now they're looking into whether they need to move again.
To qualify for asylum in Canada, you must prove a well-founded fear of persecution based on race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group, which includes LGBTQ+ people.
Her oldest son, Ollie, is trans. We aren't using her last name or saying exactly where they live because of their safety concerns. Minnesota has been welcoming, but the Trump administration's orders rolling back trans rights have challenged that sense of safety.
Is it weird, to sort of be thinking about leaving America, to have considered that?
It's so dystopian. We're living the Handmaid's Tale. Like, how is this the United States of America? Words come out of my mouth, and in my head, I'm like, this can't be real. This can't. Right? It's so bizarre. We're in the United States of America, the most powerful country in the world. And its citizens are looking at asylum in other countries. Make it make sense.
Claiming asylum has been a tough argument for Americans to make in Canada.
Typically, those claims have been hard because what you have to prove is that the state is unwilling or unable to protect you, and that there's nowhere else in your country that you can go and live safely.
That was before a slew of executive orders recognizing only two genders, banning transgender soldiers from the military, and defunding gender-affirming care for youth.
I think we're seeing a lot clearer picture of the state being the agent of persecution.
American Elliot Duvall lives in London, Ontario. He's now afraid to cross the border to visit his family.
I'm scared to go back because, one, that my passport still says a female on it. It still says a female on it, and I don't look anything like a female. Hi, Mom, how are you?
For now, this is the only way he'll get to see his mother in Arkansas. Stuck, like many others, in documentation limbo. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
You ought to see this. Two rescued pups from the Vancouver Aquarium experiencing their first snowfall and having some fun. That's next.
Two orphaned otter pups who were rescued by the Vancouver Aquarium Marine Mammal Rescue Society this summer got to experience their first snowfall.
Sure, knock it over. Nadine Trottier, a senior marine mammal trainer with the aquarium, says building a snowman for the animals is a tradition she does every year.
So this year I made a mini version for Tofino and Luna. I used their favorite toys and I've used some clams to kind of decorate the snowman, and they got the pleasure to play with it and knock it over.
Trottier says Tofino and Luna enjoyed their first snowfall as they immediately started snacking on the flakes.
They're no oysters, but they're not bad.
No, pretty tasty. So cute.
It is.
Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we'll be back at 11. Good night.